Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Prism. We are very excited. Mike Kay, the normal host, is actually unavailable today, so I'll be handling the hosting duties. And we have a very special guest here on the Prism today. So Jorge Casenos, who is our Managing Director for Portugal and Spain for N2 Growth. Jorge, welcome to the team today.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to have you for sure. And Vera and Joe, two more of our regular attendees to this forum, is here, which I'm sure all of our audience is familiar with now. We were talking when we were offline about what the prism really means, and the prism is the idea of this show was it's the lens of leadership viewed through different viewpoints, right? And it's just like that prism. It's just like how the emblem is that you can see that is. It's one simple topic, but boy, everybody has different perspectives on things. And we think, at N2 Growth, it's a privilege to be here because it's a global enterprise. And we have this global perspective on all sorts of things from when it comes to talent management, to leader development, to just anything that we specialize in. We all see things a little differently, which makes us a great and diverse organization to be very powerful with. And so we're going to have some fun today. What I thought we were going to do, we normally pick a centralized topic, and it's very been topical for where we've been in society for the last few months. But what we're going to do today is called Leadership Roulette. So I have a book here that has a little bit of a leadership saying for 365 days out of the year, and you're supposed to say, okay, today's this date, and I go to it, and I look at it, and I reflect on it, and all that stuff. But what we're going to do today is play roulette. So what we'll do is, and we will have our guest do this first, since Jorge, you've honored us with your presence from Spain, and I'm going to just randomly flip through this book. And we'll have each person say stop. I'll stop on that page, and we're going to talk about that topic. And the reason we do this is for a couple things. One, I think it shows some vulnerability, right? Like us as leaders shouldn't be afraid to talk about any topic. And if you don't know what it is, you don't have a great answer, that's okay too, right? Be vulnerable about it, and ask other teammates about, hey, what do you think about this? But from a leadership perspective, talk about whatever comes to you, because that's the reality of the real world, right? The real world is when you show up for the office that day, you really don't know what's coming at you. And so you should be flexible in all of that. So these topics will end up being relevant. There'll be a point of view that we'll all talk about, and we'll probably pick 5 or 6 of these over the next 30 to 45 minutes. And I hope everybody at home has fun with this also. And we'll look in the comments section to see if you have a particular comment or want to add or disagree with what we've chosen to talk about with the topic in our answers. So let's have a trial run with this and have some fun. So,
all right.
Jorge,
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this. I'm just going to flip through this sucker, and you just tell me stop, and we'll see what happens.
Stop.
I didn't even open it yet.
All right. So I thought your thumb inside.
Here we go. All right, you say stop.
Stop.
Okay,
Stop.
there it is. Okay, so the topic is called Manage Your Emotions. And the subpart to that is, when faced with emotional decisions, ask yourself, what does the team need, not what will make me feel better? So let's talk about emotions. What is your point of view on being emotional as a leader, and then bringing those emotions into your decision-making process?
Well, I think to start with, is a very profound topic, because obviously when you are leading a team, you are not going to be free of emotions any time that you are talking, you are taking a decision. So the idea, for example, what comes to my mind is if you had a bad day. For example, you had a discussion, being a CEO, you had a discussion with a member of the board, and you are not in a very good mood. And someone from your team that is not at all related with that issue, and obviously he didn't have any to do with that difficult part of your breakfast day, for example, comes to you asking for help, and you are not in a good mood. So how do you manage your own emotions? And here it comes when you have to recognize that you don't have all the answers, and maybe you have to say, hi, Pedro, I didn't have a very good day so far, so excuse me if I don't treat you as I used, but let's try to get a coffee, let's try to relax a little bit, and help me get down to my usual state of mind or to my usual way of talking to you. That could be my first answer. What about you, Vera? What would you do?
What would I do? Good. Well, I think that emotions, again, as Jim mentioned at the beginning, the issues of vulnerability of leaders. So I think that these two aspects, they are really linked together. And I would agree with you, Jorge, that one doesn't have to hide his emotions necessarily all the time. Even though I think that, let's say in the classical traditional school, they taught us that, just keep emotions for yourself and just approach everything with a cold head. So I think that technically it works. And especially if we speak about some critical decisions and some very delicate situations, I think that with to sleep with the problem, it really helps. So you don't do it today, you take your time, you write a draft of an email, maybe with some of emotions inside, but then the next day you look at it with different eyes and just approach a problem with more constructive approach. But then I also totally agree with you, Jorge, that if it's a spontaneous moment and for example in a relationship, in a daily work with your colleagues, with your peers, if you see that this emotion is here, but you still have to move forward. So the fact of accepting it is definitely a good solution, and we don't have to be afraid of it, because essentially it's about human nature, it's about human beings, it's about cultures. And I know that in Spain emotions, they're present because I've spent a couple of years working there. So it's also part of the national character and part of the beauty.
Yep, absolutely.
Joe? Up, you're on mute.
Jeremy,
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
What is the question? Can you say that again?
What is basically? I've already closed the book, so no,
you
you
did?
don't get to have it. No, basically, it's like, how do you bring, from a leadership perspective, how do you bring emotion to work, and what is your level of that? What are your thoughts about
Allowing
emotion
it
at
or
work?
disallowing it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Listen, I think it's a great topic, and Jorge, quite frankly, it's funny. I was just enjoying watching you talk because you have such an infectious smile. It's just it was just great. But Vera and Jorge, I like your responses. I may disagree a little bit in the sense that emotional intelligence is emotional IQ has become such a fad in terms of a topic to discuss, and I think culturally it's different in different countries, right? In terms of emotions and allowing emotions into the workplace, etc. But I think it's tricky as a leader. I think if you allow your emotions to trickle into work, in other words, Jorge, you said maybe you had a bad day, maybe you had a bad morning or something, right, at home. If you allow it to come into work, sometimes I think employees may misinterpret that as you are not feeling so good about work. Something bad happened at work, and it could have a negative impact on the folks at work. So it's tricky. I think this is very tricky. I think you have to be very careful about displaying emotions, because I think people may misinterpret it. Now, if you have a very small, intimate company, it's very different. You can be, in my opinion, I think you can be a lot more transparent in that regard, because you can explain to them. But when you have a bigger company, you may explain to one person, but by the time it trickles down to 20 or 30 or 40 employees later, they may, the rumor mill is, we're getting acquired, or something bad happened at work, or we're going to have a bad report, or our 10Q is not going to be, whatever the case may be. So I think I think it can be a very tricky thing, the bigger the company is.
Let me place you a question then. So let's imagine that you try to hide your emotions, all right? And you say, even though I had a difficult breakfast, to put it that way, you try to talk to this peer of you or to someone working in your team, and you try to hide your emotions. And that person at the end of the day is going to discover that you had a bad day for whatever reason, for one of your answers or whatever. So he's going to leave your office thinking, this guy as a leader is not true to himself. He's not being honest enough to talk to me and to open himself up to me, recognizing that even though he's taking today a leadership position, he had a bad day, something that could happen to any of us, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think I love this because it is the delicate balance, right? Because Jorge, you opened up by saying we're all human, and that is exactly right. And one of the core competencies that's emerging in the 21st century, and as we move forward in the fourth industrial revolution, all those kind of things, is that it's about bringing the human back into it, right? By understanding, to be a good leader, you need to understand human beings and accept the fact that everybody has a bad day. Somebody has a bad day, it happens, and so you have to be relatable. Vera, I love the fact because you're actually making Joe's point in a way that the classic, be very careful about hitting send on an email when you're emotional.
Yeah,
when you wake up that next day, it's a completely different email, right? You're just like, I don't want to send that. It's just, and you have to be self-conscious of that. And I think that's Joe's point. Joe, I'm speaking for you here. We'll see. But you have to be careful about wearing your emotions on your sleeve, because then you could be viewed as a very reactive type of a leader, or so over emotional, people read into it. So I think you create this culture within your organization to Jorge's point of high trust, and vulnerability, of self-awareness, as Vera says, and for Joe to say you do need to be centered as a leader and know the balance, because you could be an overreactive person to where you're always emotional, and that does nobody any good.
Bingo. Jim, you put words in my mouth, but you did it perfectly, because that's exactly right. It is about a balance. And some people, as we all have experienced, are extremely emotional. So it's every day that something's different and something's wrong, or they had somebody may have said something that offended them, or whatever the case may be. And from a leadership perspective, you don't want to foster the environment of every day could possibly be a bad day. We all have bad days.
That's right.
So yeah, no, that was well stated. Thank you.
And Dr. Jacqueline, she's joined us on these live streams before, and her last sentence is very important. Let others know that you're unavailable for a while, and just take a break. If you just need, a lot of times we talk about it, and we talked about it last week
yes.
in our resiliency, the cleansing breath, right? Take that cleansing breath. And when you're getting all riled up, you're about to hit send on that thing or whatever, stop, stand up, cleansing breath, recenter yourself. It's critically important.
I was just going to say that, Jim. This is the perfect topic for last week's conversation, because it
That's
is.
right.
Take a deep breath. Try to separate personal from work. The second you walk in the door, leave the bag. Check the bag at the door. And when you leave work, check your work bag at the door, so that when you get home,
Bingo.
You can enjoy your family.
Bingo. And I think for listeners on this live stream, this is a common thread, right, that goes through here. And I'll sidetrack for a moment. So I just got done recording a podcast. So if everybody's not familiar, the iron sharpens iron movement on any podcast host. But I just literally hung up from this podcast, and we were in the discussion about the difference as a leader between practicing and action. And you would almost think that's the same thing, right? Practice and action. But Joe, what's interesting is or for Vera, the action would be hitting send and just, I'm an action leader, I'm going to get all my stuff out. The practice is what you just said, Joe, about, okay, be intentional about what you do every single day. Be intentional about practicing the art of leading, because there's science behind it too, that we're all human and all of those kind of things. So really great stuff. Jorge, way to tee us up. We're going to have you as a common, yes, you're going to be our permanent guest here. You keep going like this. So, it's good stuff. Vera, would you be ready?
Yes.
Here we go.
Stop.
All right. Solution orientated. Do problems stop, or do they stretch you? Do problems stop you, or do they stretch you?
That's an
Solutions
interesting one.
orientated. How about that one?
Do problems stop or do they stretch you? It's very interesting with respect to being solution oriented, because I think that it's with Jorge and his partner that we have recently done this assessment to define different leadership profiles and different traits that let's say you prioritize in your daily work. And I think that with me it was solution orientation and goal orientation, something like this. At the same time, speaking about problems, I think that it's evolving with the time. So what we have seen, for example, in candidates, seeing them evolving from managerial to leadership roles. What I've probably seen in myself is that your resilience grows in proportion, let's say, like in parallel with critical situation, in parallel with facing specific problems. I think that there's no definitive answer, and again, it's not something which comes in a person with let's say with his character maybe. So it's something which you develop with the time. But for me, it's definitely a long road of learning, of self-discovering, and really understanding that eventually problems, they do have solutions, and the problems, they make you grow, they make you stronger, but you need to reach maybe certain kind of critical points in your professional life to realize it, and to find strengths in yourself to really start enjoying this. And I think that this is one of the topics we have discussed, probably not within group, we have discussed it with the previous group, is really how we perceive problems, how we perceive failures. It's one of the fundamental elements of forming you easily as a leader, and finding responses to some unexpected force majeure critical situations. What's your view on this, Tim? Again, it's a very broad topic, so it's
Yeah, I think. Did you say Joe or Jim?
It began with a J. I don't know.
I said team.
Oh, team.
Oh, team. I'll
Joe.
chime in. Yeah, I'll chime in. Like, listen, I think if it stops you, if problems stop you as a leader, I don't think you're surrounded with the right people, because I think if you're so busy thinking about every little problem and not having people around you, whether you're delegating or whether you're asking questions, because nobody knows every answer to everything. It has to stretch you. It stretches you because it stretches you to think differently. It stretches you to think about who can handle it. It stretches you to think about what it is that you actually don't know, so you can go retrieve the right answer or have the right person. We always talk about surrounding ourselves with people as leaders. Surround yourself with people who are smarter and better than you are, so that when you do have problems that arise, they can help you get through it. And I think a great leader is one who can focus on building his staff or grooming his staff to become better, not focusing on every little problem that comes in. But the problems that come in, the resolutions are you have great people around you, in addition to yourself, that can help solve these problems. But I think problems do continually stretch. This COVID problem is a problem that nobody has encountered, right? But I would venture to say there's been people who've been through a multitude of situations, difficulties from a leadership perspective, whether it be board members, other CEOs, doesn't matter, military leaders, what have you, where if you can lean on those folks versus getting stuck, just thinking and being trapped in that hamster wheel, I think getting stuck is a problem. So I think it should stretch, in my opinion.
So Jorge, do you believe that it's realistic that you could shape a team to do what Joe just said? Can you shape a team to think in a solution-based mindset? Or what happens if there's somebody that's just the Mr. No person or the Mrs. No person and all of that? How do you shape this to get to the point that Joe is saying they're coming to you with these issues?
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite topics. For example, what I believe is that nobody can choose, for example, if COVID-19 is going to come to us or not. But once you have to face what is going on with COVID, something that you cannot manage because it's outside your sphere of control. It is out of your. I have very little influence in what is going to happen with the final solution with COVID. But what I can do different from any other person is how I react to the COVID-19. So, for example, I can react, and it is something understandable. I can get depressed. I can get locked in my house and say, I'm not going to get out, I'm not going to work. Or I can say, well, this is happening to everybody. And what I'm going to show is that I can react in a very different way to other people. So, for example, I can take the decision of working harder. I can get around the people of my team to try to get closer to them, to try to get them motivated, to try to push them to work even within these very difficult situations. And at the end of the day, that is what is going to define your personality as a leader. It is not how you react when everything is going your way, but it is how you react when things are going the other way around, when things are getting tough. So,
Yep.
That's absolutely right. You know, it's interesting. Stanford University just did a long-term study on various global leaders, and they came up with a set of 8 mindsets that you should have as a part of your behaviors. And one of those mindsets is an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And that's exactly what you were just talking about, Jorge, about, like, you know, I call it, when I teach leadership development, victim versus victor, right? Mm-hmm. Is the glass half full or is it half empty? Exactly. You know, I have a beautiful sunny day out today. You couldn't ask for a better day, but someone else is going to say, well, why isn't it raining? Because we're in a drought. I sure wish it was raining, right? It's always how you view the thing. And you should, you know, leaders and organizations should have an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. You know, almost everybody is pre-programmed primally to think scarcity, right? Back to the caveman days, you had to hoard your food, you had to protect who you were, you had to protect your tribe, all of those kind of things. And that's built in our DNA to actually be more negative than positive, to actually look at scarcity more than abundance. But you got to flip the script and have that abundance mindset. And then you'll always provide a solution. To Vera's point, like, you'll get there. You'll build yourself up through that long-term resilience and find a solution. That's really cool stuff.
That is good. Did you see the posting from Jose?
I did not.
See it, Jim?
Did you read it, Joe?
Yeah,
I did not.
So Jose Miguel, he had said, "What is the impact? What is the impact in a non-emotions controlled environment? The issue of judging instead of starting an open conversation."
Huh. You want me to answer that? Who's going to
Yeah,
answer that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Judging versus an open conversation. That's another one. That's another one of the leadership mindsets that Stanford came out with. Is you have to have a caring attitude instead of a judgmental attitude. So people that walk around and judge do just that, right? They self-contain their mind on, they've already prejudged this person. That's where prejudice comes from, right? And all of those kind of things. Whereas if you have a caring mindset to the environment and to a person, you have empathy for them. You understand that they had the bad morning breakfast. You know, they hit that email when they shouldn't have, but you're going to go ahead and excuse them for that because they were emotional and not rational about it. All of those kind of things play into this. And if you come in a non-emotional thing, then you're a robot. And here's the thing people got to remember. You don't want to try to create a culture of robots, because guess what? That's not what we are. We're vulnerable human beings.
here, Jim, I believe it's relevant a comment coming from Rui Cuellas from Portugal. He's saying, we are not thinking machines, we are feeling machines that think.
That's
I love
well
that.
stated. Yeah,
Yes.
very well stated.
Very good one.
Copy that down. I want to keep that quote. That is amazing. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. All right, Joe, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
All right, stop.
All right. Be a part of the vision. Ask your teammates to articulate your organization's vision to make sure everybody is on the same page. So let's talk about, what is your idea of you as a leader creating a vision for people, and then also kind of the vision of an organization. Let's just stick on that word vision, and what's your opinions on all of that?
Lord, so vision I think is I think it's extremely important. I think people sometimes get vision mixed up with core values mixed up with there's a plethora of different items that we can discuss here, but let's just focus on the vision one, right? And I think vision is so important because when the vision is set for the company, then we all have a rallying cry. So in other words, if you're on a sport team or you're in the military or whatever it may be, you know what the goal is. The goal is to win, right? The goal is to win the game, but you could break the game out into different components, whether it's offense, defense, different plays, tactically. Same thing with the military, doesn't matter what you're in. I think in a corporation, when there's a vision, and whether it's quarterly meetings, annual meetings, it doesn't matter, fireside chats, when everybody understands the vision, I think it gives an opportunity to really build around that vision and to have the rallying cry, and where everyone gets in the trenches together and are going towards a common goal. When the company or a team or whatever it may be doesn't have a specific set vision to where you're trying to get to, and it's not just where you're trying to go, it's how do you go about getting there. Right? So we're not just trying to be the best, sneaker company in the world. It's how are we going to do that? So it's encompassing everything. What is the vision? And usually a vision is something that's really never really attainable. It's something you're always striving for, but it's almost impossible to get there, but you're always striving for it. And I think it's super important to have it, but not just to have it, to actually live your everyday, and your employees and your team members, your leaders in your organization, to be living the same thing. So the values that you're living typically will go into and work towards that vision.
So Vera, how do you confirm that within an organization? How do you, if Joe is clearly laid out how a leader should, be a part of this vision and how an organization should accept the vision, how do you know if that's working or not?
You mean how do you measure, or how do you
measure? How do you measure if
right.
the vision is even vision worthy? How do you measure if somebody is embracing it or not?
Right. Well, it's an interesting point, and before answering your question, actually made the link with with the previous quote to see how to align vision and problem solving, because it's definitely not about having a vision as a statement, but thinking how to transmit the spirit, how to transmit the vision in an organization. And I think that if we apply it to this specific context where we're living right now with COVID-19, again, the vision, maybe this vision has changed, right? Maybe it's a vision that is really adjusted to the critical situation. But to make this vision work, you have to make sure that people at all levels in your team, they actually empowered and engaged to take the necessary steps to attain to attain the goals, but guided by the vision. So how do you measure this? I think that maybe it's something hard to measure using specific tools, scorecards, which we can use to measure culture, but vision is still even more abstract, and I think it's even broader in this context. But I think that critical situations, problems, they definitely help you to measure how the vision, how the organizational spirit is transmitted within the organization. Because people, they are full of doubts, full of insecurity, and I think that as a leader who's caring about the teams, you have to make sure that it's not that you overload them with let's say problems which should be part of your responsibility, legally speaking. No, you're just transmitting the organizational emotion to the team to make sure that they feel engaged, they feel useful, and they often come up with great ideas.
No, I love that connection point for sure. Jorge, your opinion?
Well, I would take a step even backwards. From my perspective, what is very important is to bear always in mind what is our purpose. What is the reason why we exist? Why are we here? Why are we in business? what are we trying to achieve, right? And then you have to establish what is the road we are going to follow, and that is the vision. But at the beginning, I mean, many companies fail to keep consistency between the purpose, the reason why they exist, and the vision they establish for themselves, right? And then it is going to be very difficult to be consistent, because if I'm not being consistent with my purpose and my vision, then the rest of the mission, the strategies could be, to say the least, fragile. I mean, they are not going robust enough to keep the consistencies we need in our business. So I will always get back to the purpose.
That's a fantastic point, right? If you're an organization that makes pens and paper, but your vision is to be the world's best computer company, that there's a disconnect, and no one would ever buy into it. It just wouldn't make sense. So that's a great point to always bring back. And I think my personal opinion on if we know the vision's happening or not is to find somebody outside of your sphere of influence. If you're in a manufacturing plant, to go down to the manufacturing floor and find one of the newest employees and ask them about the vision. And then you'll know, does the vision statement, does that vision really resonate? Does the person on the assembly line that just is putting part A into part B understand how important they are in the overall success of that, of their purpose to get to where they want to go? And to Joe's point about, it's never ending, but you want to give them something. So I think that's just one of the ways that I always, when I walk around an organization, you always pick out somebody that is either new or is not really connected in the leadership realms of the organization, and see, does it reach down to them and see their level of importance. So it's always good stuff. We have an acquaintance with many of us here, a great senior executive consultant by the name of Jim Kerr, and he talks about vision by calling it a vision story. He goes, it's very important that the humans, we get back to this human-centric thing, kind of programmed to retain things in a story. When back in caveman times, they painted it on the wall, right? So they could tell about what, how the hunts went from years ago and things like that. And everybody's able to retain and visualize where you want to be from kind of a storytelling mode. And that's just an excellent tip or trick for everybody out there about when you create a vision, kind of turn that into a vision story, because then again, whoever is in that organization can tie themselves and visualize into it. Good stuff. All right, so I guess I'm getting picked. Does somebody want to just yell stop, and I'll do it?
Stop.
All right. All right, get to the bottom line. Practice getting to the bottom line today. Has anybody ever heard the word Bluff before, or the acronym Bluff?
Yes.
Bottom line up front, right? I think in today's high-speed world, I think in today's level of connectivity and distraction, and the level of distraction that's happening with everybody, this is very culturally dynamic, though, too. And I think I'd like everybody's opinion on this. But if you have high trust, what you can do is provide the bluff right away to somebody. You can, in an email, put a bluff, bottom line up front, and say, we need to achieve this. And then you can put the meats and potatoes, below it. But it allows everybody to understand your intent right away. And if you have high trust with an organization, you should feel empowered as a leader to say, hey, Jorge, this is what I think. And this is the bottom line on what we need to do. And then it can create the discussion, but at least you are very aware of what I'm thinking. And you place that bottom line up front. I bet, though, that doesn't work in all cultures. Any thoughts on that? What about the level of sensitivity of being, this is what's on my mind? Is that going to come across as insensitive?
I'm thinking about.
You're on mute, Joe. Sorry. Sorry, Vera.
Go ahead, Vera.
No, I was thinking, because it's a very interesting point to really reflect on when applied to specific cultures. So I think that You're absolutely right in this respect, and in cultures like France, for example, where you have lots of formalism when it comes to business communication, sometimes it's a little bit hard, you know, to like for leaders to deliver the message, but it's part of the culture. It's not that you see it everywhere, but you know, this direct, straightforward approach in certain contexts, it's just not well seen or not appropriate. But I think that coming back to universal values, this is definitely a way to move forward, and especially again in critical situations, because sometimes there's no time to read between the lines, and really no time to also think about let's say culturally specific matters. So in the world we are living today, it definitely pays off, because it's also something which is linked to agility and fast decision making.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I would
Jim?
agree. I was going to say, I think it just helps. I think it helps promote, you know, quicker, better decision making, because you're getting directly to the point right up front. Whether it's, you know, I know there's different cultural communication styles and whatnot, but I have always respected folks who just get to the point and are direct about what we're trying to accomplish, and then we can talk about how we're going to try and accomplish it. But I think otherwise, your wheels will spin, and then you're not sure if they're just passive aggressive, they're beating around the bush, what are they trying to get to. So I think, you know, whether people see it as crass or just direct or to the point, I think I think if it's done the appropriate way, I think it's an important, very, very important thing.
Right. But one more point, because I think, again, like it totally makes sense, but it's true that in certain contexts you have to be careful with it. Because I just thought a little bit about my previous experience when I was working with Asia, for example. So the culture there, it's way too strong to go against it, and sometimes the like doing business and respecting cultural codes in this respect, it definitely helps, because there you cannot really go straight to the point, because people, they can feel offended, and you know, you have to approach it from a different angle. But the thing is that no matter what the culture is, you have to find maybe the shortest way to reach this point, to be able
Great point.
you know, to be straightforward and deliver the message, and make your audience engaged and involved in the process.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Jorge,
Very good.
your opinion.
Here, I believe we are entering into the culture space, corporate culture. So, for example, depending on what is the culture of the company where you are working with, it's going to be very different. So, at the beginning, for some, I've been managing director, CEO of American companies since before year 2000. So I'm very used to the American corporate culture, and it is true that is going to the straight to the point is good. It has many advantages, because we get a very clear understanding right away of what are your expectations, what should I deliver. But in some other culture, it is better to give some perspective before you get to the point. It's a way of explaining why you are going to take that decision, or why are you expecting those final results, right? So at the end of the day, I was reading the other day that Peter Thiel's, when he was investing 200 million pounds at Airbnb, he was saying, don't fuck up the culture, because it's all about culture. So if our culture is, if we are used to work in a very straightforward mood, it's going to be always well received. But if you move to another culture where they try to explain more the reasons why, or why are we taking this path instead of this other, it's going to be very aggressive sometimes. So that could be my perspective. It is not that much depending on the country you are working with, but depending on the corporate culture you are working with.
And you know what?
Yeah.
It also depends on the topic, right?
Yep.
It really
Yeah,
depends on the
you bet.
topic. I think that's the most important part. Outside from culture, you're right, Jorge, but the topic. Some things just warrant, you have to explain beforehand, and other things you just better off just getting to the point. It just depends.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It's always good when the topic ends up, it just depends. Because it's true, right? Yeah, it just depends. I don't know. It's just our opinions on this. But no, I agree. I love Vera's point, Vera, about like once you figure out the cultural or organizational dynamic that you're in, figure out what the quickest way to get to the point is. And I think that was a great point of view that you had, because yep, you can have an Asian culture that still requires a bunch of context be put in place, but actively work to say, how can I reduce that to where they, the culture is respected, it is in the right format organizationally, to Jorge's point, but you're still getting there quick. You're not beating around the bush,
right,
kind of thing. Because I think
Exactly.
that's awesome. All right, so we've done 4 little things. Would anybody like to do the bonus round? We'll do one more bonus round as we come in here. Who's courageous enough to do one more? And this will be our final topic.
The guest?
The guest. Wow.
The guest,
Yeah,
that's
look
right.
at that.
Maybe.
Here we go. Jorge.
Stop.
Courageous leadership.
All right.
I'm just going to leave it. I'm not even going to tee it up. We're just going to talk about courageous. What a great way for the Prism live stream to be talking about anyway. So what is courage from your point of view? What's courageous leadership? It's kind of a bold statement.
It is.
Who wants to start? Vera,
Oh,
why
you
don't
know
you start?
no.
Do you want me to start?
You
Okay.
get to start.
This is how it goes.
All right. So, I mean, for me, courage is not to be afraid of making a mistake,
I love
for
that.
example. So, courage is to take your way even when you know that it's not going to be the most popular way. Courage is to lead by your principles, by your values, by your way of seeing things, even when it's going to cost you the job.
Ha.
What about that?
That
Love
was
it. Love
perfect.
it. Well done.
Yeah. Well, Joe,
Well done.
you want to add any more to that?
No, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. You literally said it perfectly. I think, especially in today's day and age, where everyone's watching their P's and Q's and politically correct and if you live your values and you follow, you lead with your values, regardless. I think that's being courageous, and that's courageous leadership. Yep. By the way, you started off great. Courage is leading. It's not being afraid to make a mistake, because we're all afraid to make that mistake. We all are. So I think, and I think being human is acknowledging the fact that we are human and we make mistakes. So,
You bet.
somebody just said, Ricardo, courage requires authenticity, which that's pretty much exactly what you said. I think that's perfect. Well
Amen
said.
to that.
Vera.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just a point with respect to Ricardo's comment, because adding to what Jorge said, and again, like I cannot agree more. It's great how you resume the situation. And definitely, it requires authenticity, and it requires like in a way that as a leader, you don't have to be afraid to show your weak points, to be vulnerable, and in a way to engage your team in this collective problem solving. But the ultimate goal again is to find a shortest way of resolving the problem. So definitely, I think that courage, it depends on the situation, it depends on specific circumstances of a leader. But in the world of today, we realize that it's actually it's not that something that puts you in a survival mode, but I think that now that we see in certain circumstances, you cannot really rely on long-term planning and forecasting and calculation. I think that's where courage has its ground to develop and to be developed, and to actually how to say to the word. I mean, it's where the courage has its ground to shine
Yes.
Yeah.
You bet.
and to bring some results.
Well, I think we were all courageous today. You all were all courageous today to play some leadership roulette. I certainly had fun. I hope all of us did, and our listening audience did too. And it's just again to display that, courage can be in many different forms, and just playing games can be courageous at sometimes with this too. So, one of the things that I would recommend for anybody that's out there listening now is play this game with your people, play this game with your team. And just kind of elicit this kind of conversation, because what a great professional development hour, right? We covered 5 very diverse topics. It's great professional development for anybody that's listening out there, and you'll also get a sense for how your team thinks and where they are developed and all of those kind of things. So good tip and trick for all of us. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us as a guest this week. We certainly loved your opinions and your personality, and great artwork in your backdrop there. It's fantastic. So we really appreciate you being here with us, and we hope that you can find time out of your busy schedule to join us in some future episodes too, because we certainly would love to have you back.
It would be my pleasure.
Awesome. Vera and Joe, thanks again for some
Thank you, guys.
great
Thank you, Tim.
conversation this week. Please make sure that you leave comments in any of these forums. We'll get back to you on any of this, and let us know if this is the type of things that you want to be out there listening to from the listening audience. And always remember that N2 Growth has a live feed at this same time. So no matter what time zone you're in, it's during this 1 hour block period on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And the topics are very diverse, so you can get all 3 episodes in and still learn quite a bit. So we appreciate you logging in and listening to all of us. And just come back next week for another exciting episode, and we'll have Mike K back with us too. So thanks again, everybody.
See you, bye.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.